Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of Action Items. I am DC Man Sfregola. I am your host, and I am glad that you are joining me yet again. For everyone, as we always say, all around the world, the morning, the evening, wherever you are, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you for spending this Friday with us. As always, Action Items is produced by Let's Talk Supply Chain and brought to you by New Gen Architects, your partner in technology-driven supply chain transformations. So, in our second to last episode of the year, can't believe it's been almost a year already, we are going to be talking about peak season challenges as we are right in the middle of learning about inventory challenges that were definitely, we can all agree, were started last year, maybe even before that, as people were trying to figure out how to handle delays, inventory shortages, managing customer demand, etc. And we are going to be talking about agility within your supply chain, which we know is everyone's favorite buzzword. I love a buzzword. But in this case, we really are going to be talking about the importance of agility within your supply chain. So this month, I am joined by Matt Fain, CEO and founder over at popcapacity. Thank you. Good morning to you, Matt. I know that you were seated in Atlanta, where I sometimes find myself, depending on where I am in the world. But before we get started, you are a veteran in the game. You have been transportation, warehousing, like you are not new to this. You are true to this. So just give everyone a little bit of a background of where you are, how you got started, and your life in supply chain.
Yeah, of course. So I'm not a 40-year veteran guys in the game, but I have been in the game enough to see all the different changes that have happened, right? I feel like I started in the 3PL transportation brokerage world. I owned a franchise-based organization called Blue Grace Logistics. And that's where I really cut my teeth and started understanding the great, wonderful world of supply chain and logistics, right? We had focused heavily on managed transportation, so more strategic type transactions, not just the typical transaction, just trying to find a truck, right? We really did focus on understanding the shipper's real needs and how we could deploy the right strategy based on, their need. I then sold that and started an asset-based trucking company. I wasn't pulling around 53-foot dry vans. It was a sprinters and box trucks network, but we focused on time-critical freight, a lot in the construction world, a lot in the high-value tech world, which ultimately led me to popcapacity, right? We started seeing and identifying some need for a better way to source warehousing capacity, not necessarily through Google or your broker friends. There was a better way to do it, so we decided to go ahead and kick that off right in the beginning of a pandemic. So I've walked all sorts of different journeys in the supply chain, and each and every one has been interesting and fun and humbling, if you would.
Oh, that's a good one. Humbling, because I think, and I can appreciate that. I think because if you ever think that you know a lot, working in supply chain will teach you that you don't really know anything.
Right.
You know so little. Because every company you talk to, every piece of everything, you're always learning. So it's definitely humbling in that perspective. It's fun if you really enjoy learning, but it's definitely humbling in the sense of, oh, I actually didn't know that and didn't know that either. So what do I know?
Right. It's something new every day, because I feel like you feel like you've mastered something and then it changes, right? And it changes for a good reason, but regardless of change creates a different strategy, creates a different challenge, But I think, if you've been in it long enough, you've been in game long enough, you understand that we all have very, very thick skin. We all have very open minds. And I'm gonna put it out there. We're probably, becoming the most innovative industry in the world, right? Because
Yes, I can agree with that. I will toot the supply chain horn. I I will say, because I will say also, when I first started, I transitioned from marketing to supply chain in 2016, the fall of 2016. And there was a lot of conversation, I think, from the time I started until probably right when the pandemic hit, that like there was this talent shortage. People weren't really studying supply chain. No one wanted to get in supply chain because it wasn't sexy and like, oh, what's really going on? But now, to your point, with all of the innovation that's really being put to the forefront, because let's be honest, there was a lot of technology, that was already happening before the pandemic. But it was one of those things that, like, yeah, cool, whatever. But now it's always in the headlines. A lot of universities are now coming up with new programs. People who, universities that didn't have programs before. So it's definitely becoming, an innovative industry for sure, with all of the investment dollars and, the different digital and the data that is swarming around in the industry, for better or for worse. I don't know, for better or for worse.
For better, I hope.
Yes, yes. But you made a comment, which I don't remember what it is, but it made me think about, right when you said, right when you think you know something, you realize that something's going to change, which is very relevant to our topic, because we put out the survey in LinkedIn this week to figure out, okay, of everyone out there, are things going as planned? So like, you think you have something ready to go and you've planned for peak season, and now peak season is here, or any day really, in the world of supply chain, you plan for something and then it doesn't go that way. Or you didn't really plan the way that you should have. So to lead into our conversation and our topic for today, almost 50% of the respondents to the survey did say that things are going as planned. Do you think our sample was too small? Do you think things really are going as planned across the entire industry?
It's still early, right? I mean, I think everybody has identified their partner for the season, right? The inventory's in, clearly. We're at unprecedented lows as far as warehouse capacity is concerned. But I think they've identified their partner, but they really don't know, are the items that are sitting in that warehouse the right items to be in that market, right? Did your data analyst and demand planners do the job right and understand that, okay, these are our top 50 SKUs for this region? Because we understand that not every item sells in a redundant market every single time, right? There's volume swings for each additional SKU. So I think we'll figure they might think it's perfect right now because inventory's in. We've got trucks and capacity set up to do freight. We feel good, but it's going to be the consumer that tells them if they were ready. And this is why it's
very true,
right? Is you don't know until the consumer tells you. That one item that sold red hot last season might fall off this season, but yet you have 2 million of them sitting in a warehouse.
So we'll have to do this again, like in the beginning of January. Yes. Did the season go as planned? Did the season actually go as planned, or was it a dumpster fire and you were, working Christmas Day trying to figure out what to do, for the next day, for the end of the year? So talking about inventory and, warehousing capacity, things like that. We have an article from Bloomberg talking about the cost of inventory right now. And I really like that article because there was also a piece of it where they talked a little bit about the warehousing. I don't remember if it was the capacity or cost. Yeah, cost for renting. So what's your take on all of that?
Capacity tightened really quick in warehousing, right? I mean, this article speaks about 163 billion with a B, guys, $163 billion worth of inventory that is going to get dead stocked, right? They don't need it. And it's due to the fact that all the retailers and anybody who had stock outs during a pandemic or, right after a pandemic thought that the solution was bringing in everything under the sun. And it filled our warehousing space up, which increased the per square foot rate, right? You can see that in the chart, right? From 2015 all the way to current, there is a huge spike, and most of it happened from 21 to 22. So I think we'll see things soften coming out of the season. Everybody built up a lot of inventory. There's $163 billion worth of inventory that shouldn't be there, apparently. But I think we'll see things loosen, which is going to, in turn, start to see a trickle down in warehousing costs. There's a ton of warehousing space being erected right now. You've got companies like Gap who are putting their fulfillment network out there as capacity solution for fulfillment providers. You've got Amazon looking to release 10 million square foot into the market. So I think this is a spike, and things will start to level set a little bit coming out of the season.
I don't know if this is an educate me or if it is a tap into your crystal ball, and I'm going to hold you to this. And if it doesn't work out like this in the future, I will say that you don't know anything. But in my mind, what I'm trying to reconcile this, because warehouse costs increased because everyone bought all this inventory and they needed a place to put it. But now there's too much inventory, so they're going to try to sell it off. So there's not going to be as much demand for warehouse capacity in my mind. So with the new fulfillment centers and Amazon, whatever else that looks like, are those places going to be empty?
I don't think so, right? I think there will be an excess, and I'm not going to say an excess. I think we will have the right amount of warehouse space. Right? We're constructing it now.
Because before we didn't have enough.
We just didn't have enough. And not having enough, just like in trucking world, right? We don't have enough trucks. Well, guess what? The trucks you do have are really expensive. That's kind of what we're seeing in the warehousing world too. So I think we're getting right back up to where we need to be. The rates are going to come down a little bit just because of the season, right? But they're going to stabilize. I still think they're going to be higher than, 2015, obviously. But I think we'll see them trickle down and then go stable because we will have the right amount. What's going to happen during this downtime or this downturn is people are going to start looking for other options, right? If they paid a premium in 2021 or in the beginning of 22 to get that new peak season partner in, is that going to be the same the part you come into next year when the market softens? Probably not. You're going to have to, price and see if it's, cost effective, and based on how this previous season went, if they were a good service provider.
Right. So in a world where 43% of the survey respondents, they think that it's going to go as planned, because you said it's still too early to tell. The other large percentage, and I should have had these pulled up. I don't know why I didn't have them. There was another large percentage that said it is going to be a mess. So we don't know. We're just trying to figure it out. I've heard stories over, the last couple of months of, some smaller brands essentially getting kicked out of their warehouses to make space for the people who are paying the premium for that space. So in a world where you are still trying to figure out who your partner is going to be, or trying to get in at the last minute when, a lot of space is already taken up. You mentioned, Google or my warehouse buddy. I mean, what's the best procurement, methodology or process at this point?
I mean, full visibility and transparency is going to be key to finding any partner, right? Any good partner, knowing what they do, how they do it, having some historical information about, that qualifies what they've done. And we say it's going to be in the form of a marketplace, right? So we've created a digital marketplace for warehouse space, offering shippers and suppliers a single platform to engage on relevant opportunities, on real relevant opportunities, right? Going through, and I say this all the time, so anybody who's heard me in the past, you've probably heard this statement too, but from hamburgers to houses, we can all procure this through a digital environment, right? I believe you're out of the country right now. You stayed in a spot that you looked and found on this thing right here, I'm sure, right?
I
so
did.
We feel like a marketplace for those capacity solutions is the easiest, most frictionless way to find your next best fulfillment partner, warehousing partner, any sort of capacity that is tied to our marketplace.
Okay. Now, how How do you get all of your information? How do you kind of vet it to make sure that, and I know you, so I'm sure you're not like, hey, here's a survey to all of the warehouses that I found. You want to be in my marketplace? Like that's not how it works. So, when there is this marketplace like that, how do I, as the, in procurement, how do I know that these are like good people that I can trust?
Because it offers visibility. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. Not all 3PLs are built the same. Not all of them are amazing 3PLs, right? Some of them have some antiquated processes. Some of them only focus on B2B and they handle bowling ball distribution, right? That's wildly different than someone processing 25,000 packages a day. So understanding what they do well and what they don't do well, that's a huge factor in having all the information in one centralized platform to pull from is the easiest way to do it. So as far as like gaining the insights on the information, it's as simple as them telling us what they do and how they do it.
Which at least saves me 15 phone calls
Exactly.
for me to see on their website, oh, this is the location that I need. And then for them to say, oh, actually, sorry, that's kind of not exactly what we do, but I can see how you misunderstood that.
Exactly, right? It happens all the time because if you go to their website, they say that they do it all. But we all know that every warehouse doesn't do it all. They have a niche, they have a focus point. They're, food grade, they handle, food and bev, mainly, beverages and drinks, or they're a hazmat warehouse in the petroleum world. They have their core that makes it take. Yes, they will go outside their box and do something else. But in this modern supply chain, finding a partner who's willing to learn, that's great. But what do you sacrifice during that time of, well, I'll figure it out, right? I think
Right.
those days are done, right? You have to
Yes.
understand what they do well and what they do well now. And I think you can get all the information, like you said, is not a phone call anymore. I have kids. I promise you, my kids are not going to pick up a phone and call when they're grown adults in their business careers. If they're in supply chain procurement, they will not pick up a phone and call 15 warehouses and ask them, how high are your ceilings? How many docks do you have? Do you have a truck yard? Super redundant and somewhat ridiculous that you have to do that in this modern world.
Right. I don't like picking up the phone now. Like whenever
Right.
whenever whenever I see a website that doesn't have an email address or like a form, I don't ever want to talk to them ever. And then if they don't email me back, I also don't ever want to talk to them ever because I want to avoid talking on the phone. And it's not because I don't like to talk. I mean, obviously I like to talk. Like I'm a talker, but I don't want to spend my time like sitting on hold and waiting for someone to get back to me. And because if I have to call you, I personally think, and I have no data to back this up, so it could be completely false statement, but it is highly unlikely that you're going to be able to solve my problem right then within like a couple of minutes. You're probably going to have to call me back, ask somebody else. I'm going to sit and wait on hold. And then, like, God knows how long that's going to take. And that's why I don't want to call. So
Right.
it's not because I don't want to talk to you, but it's a matter of efficiency and how much I can get done, and I can be doing other stuff. Now, of course, like if I sometimes just have to sit on the phone, like it, and I'll do other stuff at the same time. But in a world where, to your point, I can marketplace, find pretty much anything. Like,
Anything.
why can't it be the same with, warehousing space? We do have a question. In terms of no, are the rates contract like or spot like? And that's from Bernard Brown
It
for
depends.
warehousing rates.
Is the business contract or spot? So I mean, if it's a short-term application, then typically you'll get a shorter term rate, right? If it is a longer term, then you'll get more of those long-term contract rates. Um, every 3PL has their 30, 60-day out clause, so you can exit the agreement if it, just doesn't work out. Our hope is that it works out because we've done all of what we're talking about is discovery, right? The whole discovery cycle to ensure that the person you're talking to is the right person to talk to. We've digitized that whole discovery cycle. So depending upon the scope of work is kind of going to dictate where your rates land. And the beautiful thing about a marketplace is that it's a direct connect model. There's no
Right.
broker liaison in the middle, right? So you're getting the most cost-effective rates in that market every time directly from the source, not from your broker friend in logistics.
Who's putting their markup on it and
Yeah, I
whatever
was a
else.
broker too, right? We had to make money. I had to eat. And that's the philosophy of a brokerage is, right? Identify it, mark it up, resell it, rinse and repeat, do it all over again. Unfortunately, in the warehousing world, there's just not enough marginal gain for both parties to be successful and the customer to still have a cost-effective rate.
Right. And at the end of the day, I mean, old business models change all the time because consumer behavior changes, the world changes, and that's where we are. In the spirit of education and kind of going off of that conversation or off of that question, I don't know if you are giving away secrets if I ask you this question. But I mean, we talk a lot from the shipper perspective and like how do I find the best warehouse, et cetera. But thinking about long-term, contract versus spot, especially if I'm thinking, I just need this warehouse space right now because we're expecting a surge for the holiday season. Or, you and I also talked about like maybe the holiday season isn't my peak season. Maybe summer is my peak season because I'm selling pool equipment or something like that. So I just need this warehouse space for like 30 days. And then I know all this stuff is going to sell out. From the 3PL perspective, is someone really going to want to work with me? Are there 3PLs that specialize in kind of those like pop up? I hate to use the word that specialize in these like pop up. I just need this for a little bit, or is the preference given to long-term contracts and long-term partnerships, or is there a little bit of everything?
I mean, it is definitely a mix. I think, it depends on the 3PL and the size of the 3PL's infrastructure. If it's a 3PL, nationwide 3PL, and they have 37 different facilities, then there's an operating expense tied to that, right? So, you're going to get that large operating expense to cover the cost, which is going to reflect in the contract rate you get. But then you start looking at the size of the contract and the how much space you need, right? So we've seen stuff as large as 700,000 square feet for 5 years. Those are going to be wildly cheaper, but they just cover concrete, right? The expectation from the shipper to get a really good rate on that large of a space at that large of a term. So, for a shipper to like, it really depends, right? The contract, if your contract value is larger, then you're going to have a decreased amount of revenues. But on the short-term stuff, you'll make more, but you don't get that term, right? I mean, I think these little things right here, these little fidgety poppers, the kids loved them for like a year. We brought in one pallet of these for 4 months, and we had a 3PL that would do it. So I think it's really based on the 3PL's capacity and what kind of shared environment do they have, right? Are they accustomed to having several different businesses and brands in their building? Because if they are, then they're accustomed to managing that. If it's a contract dedicated facility and all they have is in there is Procter and Gamble tissue paper, probably not a great fit because they're not accustomed to having different SOPs all throughout their building.
Right, exactly. That makes sense. An interesting comment from Adrian. He made a post today about capacity, just consumables. He used to have 81 box sizes, but the minimum order quantity was a full trailer. And he was like, well, that's not sustainable. that is indeed not sustainable. But that, because we are 24 minutes in and we have not gotten to the first action item, I'm going to save that procurement conversation for another topic on another month. Our first action item, what do we have, Nicole? Planning for the future while focusing on the current. I mean, that's very relevant to what we're talking about now, with understanding like, is this going to be a long-term contract, but I only have this stuff for right now. It's a delicate balance of, and I think human nature is also very much instant gratification.
Yes.
And instant gratification, not from the perspective like, oh, I want this thing, I get it, but like we feel good about solving a problem right now. We can see that we accomplished something. I had this inventory, I needed a place for it, and now I got it done. But did you create a larger problem by solving, your immediate need?
Right.
So plan for the future, but focus on the current. How do you do that?
It seems
It's an
super,
oxymoron, right?
right. It seems super impossible, right? And I think we are in a digital world. We just spoke about it. Literally, the world is at our fingertips. Anything, everything, from services to commodities, whatever you want, is at our fingertip. This gives the supply chain a really big opportunity to execute by using technology faster than we ever had before, with big, small, large initiatives. I think that, we've seen, if you have a rigid supply chain, it is possible it's going to break under tension. So agility, finding people and partners and service providers who can offer you both what you need now, but still understand where you are going. Because
Mhm.
we're not, it's an evolving thing. The whole supply chain is an evolving thing. So if you go into an environment where, like, okay, this is what I do now, and the expectation from your service partner is if it changes, then I'm not willing to make that change. There's a lot of rigid service providers out there that are legacy companies that they've done this for decades. And this is my expectation from a shipper, right? That's why you start seeing, like, the shippers of choice, right? Who are the shippers who are accommodating these large legacy supply chain companies and what they expect from them? I think that's changing. These larger companies are seeing that, whether it be an SMB, an emerging SMB brand, or a Fortune tech company, they all require you to be agile. Because when you weren't agile and the standard SOP that worked all the time, it broke. We saw it during the pandemic, right? Some traditional methods, some traditional processes did not work. So
It's
now,
very interesting that you say that, because when I think about planning now, thinking about the future and how things are always evolving, in my mind, from a business perspective, we have very much put those types of descriptors and kind of profile for startup businesses, because like they're trying to figure it out, things change, the art of the pivot, blah blah blah. Like, you've got 5 people, then you have 10 people, and you have 15. So like, as you start up and you change, but that's no longer a thing that's just for startup companies and just for small businesses. It's for everybody, because of the innovation, the digital, everything is changing. And in a world where you have to plan for the future, you also have to understand and expect that what is relevant today won't necessarily be relevant in 24 months, and won't necessarily be relevant in 36 months. So
yep,
you have to think about, from an agility perspective, how quickly do these processes and systems allow me to be able to pivot and to allow me to be proactive versus reactive? So if I'm starting to see something, can I go ahead and change to keep up with it and get ahead of it, as opposed to, oh crap, I saw that coming, but we were just too rigid, to your point, to be able to flex with the market.
yep. And that's supply chain, right? It's just, it worked. We got through it. Let's move on. Rather than thinking about, okay, well, it worked, but it worked in the most effective way.
Right.
We have other tasks to do, right? Like I said, it's a very fast-paced, evolving type industry, and we always have something to do next. So, I think it's in our blood to be like, okay, check mark, that's done, off my plate, on to the next task.
Right.
Now, a check mark, did it work? Review, what was the
Right, but
customer
did I
experience
really check
like?
it, or did I just like put a Band-Aid on it for right now?
Exactly. You
Mhm.
you you did a task. Did you
Right.
do the task in the
Solutioning versus, oh, we talked about this earlier in the year. I don't remember what the other, it was maybe solutioning versus problem solving. Like, you solved the problem right in that moment, but you didn't find a solution for it that was going to, last the,
Right.
not necessarily the test of time, but
You
at
plugged the tire,
least,
right?
right.
You got a nail in your tire, you plugged it, versus going and buying a new tire. Eventually, that plug is gonna come out, right?
Exactly. Mhm.
So, I think, but now is a crucial time that we understand you have your certain challenges in front of you now, but if you're not looking at the next new innovative way to be better, then you're going to fall behind because everybody
Right.
else is.
And that same Bloomberg article, which I think we decided maybe it was part of the article, but maybe not, but it's at least on the same link. I mean, even going into a recessionary period, inflation, et cetera, 43% of 2,600 executives interviewed, surveyed across the world are still saying that, or 42% are still saying that transformation is still an urgent priority. And it's not a world of, oh, like we don't have the money, things are getting tight, like we're gonna put this off. It's no, we have to figure this out now because things are getting tight, there's inflation, et cetera. And I can think back to what, 4.5, 5 years ago, where we would be having conversations about implementing different digital technologies and really leveraging your data, understanding your data. And we would be having those conversations with companies. And it was a lot of like, oh, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing, like, whatever. But I would say that now a lot of companies are starting to really see the value in that. So when there is a world of, I don't, if I need to procure some warehouse space, I don't mind calling, like I'm used to it, whatever. But now but isn't there a better way? Like, isn't there more value in the marketplace where all of this data is at my fingertips and all this information is already there? How is that going to improve my operations and my agility if I don't have someone that literally has to spend their whole day, Googling, narrowing down? Because to the point, and I think I might have read this in one of your guys' blog, Matt, is that you can't really Google anymore. We're all on social enough. We've understood how, the advertising and the algorithms work. The first page of results is, kind of who pays for the ad space. Who has the most ad spend. It's not necessarily who's going to be the right provider for your needs. So you're spending the time filtering through the results. You get to page 10, you find 10 people to call, and now you sit and call of them. That's your whole day. And maybe the next day, if no one answers the phone, or because it's not what a lot of people don't understand. I think that we might be preaching to the choir. Maybe the viewers, the audience does understand. The fancy Amazon warehouse of the future is not like the norm. That's not everybody's warehouse. These are people, like people are running the warehouse. That doesn't always mean that someone's going to be at the phone able to pick up. And if someone does pick up, doesn't mean they're going to have the answer,
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's the cost of that task. What does it cost you to have someone do that task, and what else can they be doing that's more productive? Right. Because I can tell you right now, having someone to call 15 different warehouses and ask the same questions 15 different times is not a good use of someone's time.
Right. Well, they can put it in a spreadsheet and then have a presentation, which
that too, right? But yeah, I mean, I think that just from any process, right? Whether it be warehousing procurement, trucking procurement, final mile procurement, it's all going to require that discovery stage to be digital, period. Right. And you start thinking about going back to the Google search results, right? Yes. 1, maybe page 2 are all based on who spent the most ad dollars, right? And I promise you right now, some of the best 3PL warehouses in the country are lucky to have a website. They're not on social media. They're not going to spend any money on a Google ad to rank higher. They're just not going to do it, right? It's a very blue collar, very good old boy legacy type industry, to where they don't put a lot of emphasis on sales and marketing in the way to really capture some of these newer brands, emerging brands, modern shippers. They don't have a way to do it. They're working with your older companies too. Right. There's a 3PL here in Atlanta, Georgia, that works with one of the top 2 largest tech companies in the world, and you never would have known they were there. He has no marketing, no advertising. He's in an area that's not a heavy distribution industrial area, but he had exactly what they needed when they needed it, and was agile enough to say, I can do this for you now, but what do you need in the future?
In the future. Mm-hmm.
It was awesome.
So we have received a 10-minute warning. What is our second action item? Adjusting to a moving demand target. That's tough.
I mean, I think it's easy. I think it's data.
Well,
Right?
drop the knowledge and tell the secrets.
Look, I mean, I guess it's how you look at it, right? If you don't have the data, and yes, it's going to be a very daunting task on, okay, what do I do in any given time by guessing? But I think every company, every savvy supply chain or shipper or supplier out there has a ton of data, whether it's aggregated through a WMS, a TMS, some sort of integration, whatever it is. They have a ton of information, right? If they use that information to understand where product needs to be placed, when they need to go through an RFP, not an annual RFP across all your different trucks or across all your different warehouses, but when is the time based on the data telling me what are the trends for me to be a reactionary, and then taking that historical information over the past 2 years and say, okay, over the course of 3 years, these are the ebb and flow. These are the dynamics that have changed. Now, what can we deploy to accommodate the current, right? But plan for the future, rolling back up to question number one. But I think the answer is data.
Right. And you know what? That's it. I will agree with that. If you're leveraging the right data and you have your people doing strategic value add activities, that's not, manual processes and, things that could very much be automated, but you're allowing them the space to use their very intelligent brains and understand the market and analyze the data and to make recommendations for next steps, then you can. I mean, there's absolutely, my introduction into the supply chain technology space was through TMS and then moved into demand planning and S&OP. So yes, if you have I don't even want to say if you have like a robust, fancy S&OP process, like you can have a rinkety dink janky S&OP process as long as you have something and then you're executing on that and sharing the right data, the right information with the right tools. Absolutely. And so I absolutely agree that yes, it is easy. And that's one of the promises of digital. If you do it the right way and you have not even the perfect storm, a decent storm, of the people, the process, the technology, the data to come at a good point, then you can adjust to that moving target and you can anticipate and get ahead of things. Like we talked about, be proactive.
Well, I mean, look at the inventory levels. Like we all knew that the answer wasn't bringing excess inventory more than you ever had before. That was the immediate solution. It was like, okay, right. People didn't have items on the shelf and they're frustrated about it. Let's just bring in all of it. They can have all of it. Well, they didn't buy all of it, right? But we knew as supply chain professionals, we knew the second that we saw demand start trickling down, like, oh, inflation is going to happen. Like, well, what we knew everything that was going to happen. So if we can just start taking some of our data, information, history, trends, and just using it, I think we'll be in a way better position for sure.
And then also, not to put the onus back on the supply chain, but when I do think that there is a world where as supply chain professionals, we do have to be able to, what's the word? Stand firm, communicate the risks to the higher level decision makers, because I know that there are tons of people who do this day in and day out. And when they read a headline that says $163 billion in inventory excess and damage, that they're like, who the funk? Like, thank you for that headline. Never thought that would have happened being in this world in the last 2.5 years. Like we study the bullwhip effect. Like that's a thing. We knew this was going to happen, but, and I don't know the answers. I don't know if this actually happened, but at what point did we as manufacturing professionals, demand planning professionals, distribution, warehousing professionals not say like, hey, Mr. CEO, Mr. COO, Mrs. CFO, this is not a good idea. And like, I'm not saying that lightly, as in that like you should consider this. I'm saying it very firmly in that you should not do this.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Or find a better solution. From the outside looking in, perhaps the best solution was stock up on inventory, because going back to the people, process, data in, the right place, they did not have the tools that would have been needed to say, what is the alternative?
Right.
Let's scenario plan. Let's figure something else out. So they went with what they knew to be true was, yes, we need inventory because we can't miss the sale, and we can't take the risk that our consumer is going to switch to another brand. We'll just have to figure out whatever the result is going to be, and the backlash is going to be as it happens. But again, like, no one in supply chain, I think, is like, oh my goodness, excess inventory. Wow.
Yeah.
What
Right.
a headline there,
All my warehouses are looking at their top shelves, being like, huh, that stuff's been here for 18 months and hasn't moved at all. Wonder
Right.
what's going to happen. Right.
Right.
So we'll see. This season's going to be interesting. I think we'll know a lot more about it come January Q1, and we'll really see who had the right strategy moving into the season for sure.
Right. Yeah, I think I might have talked about this on last month, but it's the craziest thing, and it stands out to me of just like the effect that this is having, going into Hobby Lobby in August and seeing Christmas decorations 50% off.
It's nuts.
Like, I'm never going to forget that happened.
I tell my wife all the time, I was like, babe, this season might be really good because they're slashing prices. So I'm just going to figure out what the old peak season items were last year. They're still sitting on the shelves. I'm just going to buy those at a 80% discount.
Right.
Season for the Fains.
All right. We've got less than 3 minutes. Third and final action item: removing friction from the supply chain to make our lives easier. What is, and I'm going to say one, if you can't pick one, what is like a few, very quickly, in the spirit of actionable items, and action items being a show where people can actually say, I'm going to try that tomorrow. I'm going to try, tomorrow, Saturday. I'm going to try that next week. And not the pie in the sky idea of what is something that can be removed from the supply chain relatively quickly with relative ease that is causing friction right now.
Digitize your sourcing process. If your sourcing process is picking up a phone and calling your broker friend or a truckload driver or a warehouse operator several times throughout the day, that does not need to happen anymore, right? Through marketplaces, through other procurement style tools, if your sourcing is a manual process, that can be eliminated.
And that is a very, very, very good one. And I say that because it is something that's very manual, and it's causing a lot of waste from a time perspective.
Exactly.
It causes a lot of waste from a financial perspective, because you're paying someone to do that when it could be automated. And I also so you get the value, you get the impact, but there are also a lot of options, so not to give anyone decision anxiety, but I mean, the procurement space from a digital innovation and technology perspective, it's not going to be hard to find a tool. Right. And not to say that all tools are created equal, and not to minimize the value, but also, kind of whatever you pick is going to be better than picking up a phone, and calling someone 59, sending a bunch of emails, and then keeping track of the quotes, keeping track of the contracts. I mean, there are, depending on where you are, if it's, sourcing raw material or whatever, there are different tools that can do all of that: direct spend, indirect spend. I know, Sarah at Source Day, Adar, Giga, Matt, popcapacity. Like, there's so many different tools in that space that it's very easy to say, I am going to do that. Like that is a project that can be done. The value add is very clear. This is like, sign it. Sign off on the budget, put the budget in there and give the people the time to do it. It's not an ERP implementation. It's not going to take 18 months. I mean, these are up and running tools in a couple of weeks. Time to value is very quickly. Do that.
Yep.
Do that. Automate your procurement processes.
Execute it and thank me later, guys.
Yes. All righty. Next and last show is December 9th. Oh, I mean, like not last show for forever. Why am I sad? Last show for the year. We'll see you next year. All right. Thanks so much for joining, Matt. Thank you for everyone that joined. I did see all you guys, Pakistan, South Africa, Tennessee, Georgia. We always get a little bit of everybody. I'm signing off here from Milan, Italy, in Europe. So everyone have a great weekend and a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye.